Hello, I'm Alan Dron, Europe and Middle East correspondent for Air Transport World. As part of our Air Transport Month special event, I'm here today with Abdul Wahab Teffaha, Secretary General of the Arab Air Carriers Organization. Mr. Teffaha, thank you for your time today. Can I start by asking you, we hear a lot about the major Gulf carriers, but how are the smaller airlines in the Gulf, North Africa, the Levant faring in the current crisis? Have their governments been able to step in with financial assistance?
Not much. Let me give you a small number that would put the issue of the financial assistance in perspective. In the US, the expected losses of the airlines are, of course, colossal, but the US government dedicated support through grants or loan guarantees or immediate financial bailouts in the range of almost 35% of the expected total losses in the revenue. In Europe, it's about 30%. In Asia, it's about 30% of the expected losses. And then in this region, it's only 10%. So the level of the losses are nowhere near the compensation or the support that the governments are providing. And we are not yet out of the tunnel. We are still in the midst of the second wave. The hope that the world will be able to get a vaccine soon is not there. The measures that are being taken by many of the governments to impose really draconian restrictions like quarantine and so on are not going to help, in spite of the fact that only 2.9% of all the infections were happening from incoming travelers. 97.1% were happening actually locally by indigenous infections, indigenous spread, and in the aircraft themselves. Since the start of the pandemic, only 0.000004% of the infections happened on board. So in spite of that, we see that we are really not out of the woods at all. We see that governments are still putting in place draconian measures that are affecting the travel industry that should not be there, to say the least, and would extend the period of recovery and would extend the requirement for government support from the to the airlines, I mean.
Do you think that all your region's carriers will survive the pandemic, or is there a possibility of some consolidation between airlines?
Well, unlike Europe, the ownership and control rules in the Arab region are not something that would allow cross-border mergers and acquisitions. If we are talking, at a national level within each country, whether mergers are possible, yes. But you have, in this region, you have basically two categories of airlines. Airlines which are, in every country, there are airlines which are owned by the governments, either overwhelming majority or totally owned by governments. And you have in some countries airlines which are privately owned or publicly traded. Merger between government and non-government airlines is not something that is the norm, is not usual. So we're talking about either merger of privately owned airlines or merger between government-owned airlines in each country. But for now, I don't think anyone is looking at this possibility at this point in time, simply because the whole issue is not very clear. The whole impact of the pandemic is not clear. And the way out of it is not very clear. And therefore, it will be difficult to take strategic steps towards ownership and control in an unclear environment.
Okay. I mean, looking ahead to hopefully better times, there will soon be considerable competition in Abu Dhabi between two new low-cost carriers, Wizz Air Abu Dhabi and Air Arabia Abu Dhabi. Generally, do you see low-cost carriers in the Middle East eventually taking the same percentage of the market, of 40% or more, that we see in Europe?
No, I don't think this is possible in the Middle East, simply because of the reasons I mentioned regarding the difference in the ownership and control rules. That also applies on market access and on air services agreements. Europe, for all intents and purposes, is a single market, whereby in the 27 countries of Europe, any airline actually is a national airline in all the 27. And therefore, the operations of those airlines is, again, for all intents and purposes, although from the regulatory standpoint, it's considered international when they operate in between countries, European Union countries, but effectively, they are almost quasi-domestic. So the possibility of operating where the business can be, regardless of the geographical and political boundaries of the countries concerned, exists in Europe. It does not exist in the Arab world. Right. So although there is a lot of openness and liberalization in the air services agreements in between Arab countries, but still the level of flexibility that exists with the airlines and the European Union market is not yet reached in the Arab world. Until such a time that there is an Arab single aviation market, I don't think the percentage of the ratio of the traffic that can be carried by the low-cost airlines can reach the level that has been reached in the European Union.
Okay. The Middle East has obviously been one of the most dynamic regions for airline growth in recent years. How long do you think it will be before it returns to that level of growth after the pandemic?
Well, again, it depends on two factors. Number one, governments implementing measures that correspond to the level of the risk, rather than implementing measures that are just excessive. The second factor is, of course, the immunization of people, travelers, from exposure to the virus. Now, we have formulated two scenarios for recovery. One of them, the first one, is the best case scenario, where governments after the second wave, or within the second wave, the thinking would be actually that type of restrictions on travel is not adding value in terms of the mitigation of the virus, but it is adding the hardship on the economy to the extent that by the time we apply openness completely, there will be very few tourism entities that would be able to support the recovery. So if they actually follow the international regulations or guidelines that were issued by the International Civil Aviation Organization together with the WHO, and if they follow the sensible, non-draconian measures with regards to the mitigation of the virus, and as far as travel and tourism are concerned, then the recovery can be by 2024. But if they continue the current path, I don't think there would be a recovery before 2027. And that applies not only on the Arab aviation, that applies also on aviation across the board. To add to the malaise of the industry in the Arab world, of course, the economy is a major driver of growth, and 60% of the economy in the Arab world is dependent on the oil, and the oil prices are suppressed, and that adds to the magnitude of the problem that we are facing. So it is in between 2024 to see the levels that we have seen in 2019 and go back to the high recovery we have been witnessing before that, or 2027, and by then hopefully there will be a lot. I mean, I'm not very hopeful that there will be a lot of tourism entities that will be able to accommodate the level of traffic that will be available by then. So it's in between the best case and the worst case scenario. I hope it's going to be the best case scenario, 2024.
Right. Okay. Well, Abdul Wahab, informative as ever. Thank you very much indeed. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Alan.